Let me just get this one out of the way. This is an email from Alex. From Newport.
It's an inauspicious start. Let me just get this one out of the way.
No, it's just an interesting email. Okay, let me start with a really interesting email from Alex.
Yeah.
Dear Witterers, I'm currently revising for my university finals and I'm thus in the process of trying to read all the things I should have been reading throughout the year. I suppose that makes me what I'm doing learning rather than revision, but never mind. Anyway, one of the pieces on my incredibly long list is an article by the good doctor entitled Horror on the Edge of Taste.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if Mark could give me a brief summary of the article so that I don't have to bother reading it, reducing my list, but just a little. In return, I'm happy to use the word Kermodian in my exams coming up, thus contributing to your campaign to get it into the dictionary. So just to save him a bit of time.
I'll do it very quickly. It was written for the Index on Censorship, and basically the thesis of it is that in order for horror to work, it has inevitably to always go up to the boundary of what is acceptable and then slightly beyond. It is in the way that, the classic horror fiction is, it expresses the inexpressible. Consequently, horror will always be on the edge of taste and will always be a problem for the censors. Unfortunately, since I wrote that article, the BBFC's completely rewriting of the guidelines, which means that they're now the most sensible and horror-friendly people in the world, means that it's probably not true anymore. But it was to do with horror, in order to work, has to constantly challenge whatever is the boundary of the acceptable and has to be borderline obscene in the Greek meaning off stage. Obscene off stage. The original. Have you read the book, the Roald Dahl book?
I think I've read all the Roald Dahl books.
Okay, well, here's how the film originally ended. One of the things about it is the little boy gets turned into a mouse. Okay, you remember this? He gets turned into a mouse, and at the end of the film of the witches, he gets turned out of being a mouse and he comes back to being a real boy. And that's a fudge ending, because the way the book ended and the way the film ended originally was this: the little boy was a mouse, and the little boy is living with his grandmother. And the grandmother says, "Does it bother you that you're still a mouse?" And the little boy says, "Well, I don't know, how long do mice live?" And the grandmother says, "Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years." And he says, "And how long will you live?" And she says, "Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years." And he says, "Then I'm happy," which is just a lovely, lovely ending. But everyone apparently in the previous said, "No, you can't have that. You can't have talk of death and mice. You have to turn him back and give it a happy ending." And I know for a fact the director was very unhappy about having to fudge it, because they wanted it to end as Dahl did, because Dahl absolutely had that handle on, the dark and the light, the scary and the uplifting.
Can you answer the question? Scariest kids movie ever. That's what I was trying to launch into.
Well, I think there are very scary moments in Dougal and the Blue Cat.
No,
there are.
Is that a kid's film?
Dougal, Magic Roundabout, Certificate U. That would be yes.
No, it's not. There'll be no kids who've sat and watched Dougal and the Blue Cat and thought that's an entertaining movie. Normal people, a normal class, the kind of movie that you might put on 3 o'clock on your local multiplex and kids would enjoy going to see.
Well, so the scariest kids movie have you seen? I mean, Singing, Ringing Trees.
Briefly, it was just a kind of a casual, chatty introduction to the main feature.
Oh, no, I'd have to think. I was quite scared by Return from Witch Mountain, but only because it was the title. I thought Witch Mountain sounded...
to Mark and Simon, you can decide which one you want to be. Yesterday, I watched Prom Night at my local cinema.
Why?
For Mark's recognition, I'm 15, and I thought that Prom Night was hugely disappointing. Having watched the original as well, I'd like to know, what were they thinking? However, I'd like to know what Mark thinks on how possibly they should have had a story about what happened to the main character as a child, then had a sequel to that, being the film that I watched yesterday. Of course, as we know, some sequels not as good as the prequel. What are the good doctor's thoughts?
Well, my main thing about Prom Night is the first Prom Night, which is a 1980 movie, which was an X-rated sleazy slasher movie, which did what it said on the tin. And now we have a 15-rated stupid slasher movie, which doesn't even do what it says on the tin, and is hugely disappointing. And all I think is, if you want to see those movies, see the originals. And there's no reason to go and see the remake of Prom Night, because in the same way as there was probably no reason to go and see the remake of all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. I mean, that's just... People have run out of ideas and they're just using them really as branding exercise.
No, please tell him it's nothing to do with me. From Dougie Brimson, the original writer of Green Street 1.
The novel.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just telling you what it says there.
The guy who wrote the novel said to me, yes.
Is that Dougie Brimson?
I think that must be right, yeah. And he said, yes, and I agree with you. There was something else on the web that somebody wrote something about Pirates 4 happening, and they had done a thing, 10 ways to make sure Pirates 4 doesn't stink, and the number 10 was follow Mark Kermode's advice and don't start or indeed finish without a completed script, which I was very pleased about.